our Torah reading, we always focus, of course, on this famous story of the flood. But there's another story, very brief, that is fascinating and can be interpreted in many different ways. It's well known, but we really don't focus on it since the flood seems to be the biggest story. And that's the Tower of Babel, right? A strange story, just a couple of lines. It appears near the end of this week's Torah reading. It's a story that is thousands of years old. And what I want to do today is to argue that this is a story that we need to pay attention to and that we need to think about today. It's of enormous importance. I believe it's a story that needs to be thought about, not just in where it originally took place, which is Iraq, Iran, Babylonia area, but in Europe and in America, in Western civilization in total. The Torah says that originally the world had one language and one speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in a place called Shinar, that's Babylonia, and they settled there. And it says in the story that originally the whole world spoke one language. That makes sense. After all, the people all came from the same two people, Adam and Eve. And so it makes sense that they would speak the same language. And then the story continues. They said to each other, "Come, let us bake bricks and scorch slabs." They're going to have a building project. They turned out as solid as stone and were bound with this thing called bitumen. Now, what is bitumen? I don't really know. But evidently, the text is saying that this is how the first bricks were made. And with the making of bricks, there came the first technology. So very often in the book of Genesis, they're trying to explain to us where these things first came from. The first murder, Cain and Abel. The first destruction, story of Noah. The first technology, building, right? With bricks, once you learn how to make bricks, now you can build buildings. With bricks, you can create palaces and factories and houses. Oh, so we seem to be hearing about the very beginning of civilization. So we should be very happy with this achievement, kind of like the wheel, right? And air conditioning, two great inventions. But it's not so simple. Listen now to what the people say they want to do with these bricks. The next sentence says, "Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower that reaches all the way to the heavens, so that we can make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be scattered over the face of the earth.'" In other words, they don't want to be scattered over the face of the earth. We think back to the original creation story where God says, "Go out and fill the earth." Right? Go out and fill the earth, spread across the earth. So we see already a hint at a resistance to God's goal for creation, for filling the earth with humanity. What kind of tower? A tower that reaches up to the heavens. So instead of spreading out on the earth, they're doing the opposite. They're building up to try and reach into the heavens. And who do they think is in the heavens? The gods, right? Or God, if they're monotheists, which doesn't happen until Abraham. So is that something human beings should do? Or is it intruding on the place of God? Is there not something impudent about human beings wanting to climb up to the throne of God? If so, then what these people say they are up to, that they're planning to do, sounds a bit chutzpahdik, does it not? And look at one more phrase in the sentence. They say they want to build this tower so they will become famous, and so they will not be scattered over the face of the earth, because everybody's going to want to be near those towers. So the desire to be famous, we can understand. Most people want to be famous. But why do they say that they are afraid that if they do not build the tower, that they may be scattered over the face of the earth? So what we have here is not only against God's will that we should spread over the entire earth, but also an attempt to reach to God and become God-like. Same reason we're thrown out of the Garden of Eden, because if they eat of the tree of life, in other words, eternal life, they become immortal. A lot of things in the book of Genesis are people trying to become God, which, by the way, has never stopped throughout humanity. People who want to become God-like and have God's power over creation, over other people. Now, is it really bad that they want to hold on to one culture and they wanted to control all of humanity? Our culture, American culture, has spread over the face of the earth in modern times, and we're kind of proud of that achievement. We can go all over the world, and wherever we go, we're going to find American movies, hotels, foods, signs, television, and English. People can eat at a McDonald's in India or in Thailand. You can buy an American newspaper in England or Brazil. You can see an American movie in France or in Finland. And we're very pleased with that. So why were these people so worried that they would be scattered over the face of the earth? Is that something to fear, or is that something to be proud of? And now, listen to the next line. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the children of Adam were building. There really is no humor in the Bible, but there is sarcasm. So catch the sarcasm in this line. The people want to do what? They want to build a tower all the way up to heaven because they want to reach into God. But when God wants to see what they are doing, the Torah says that God had to come down in order to see what is going on. The Torah is commenting on the patently absurd, ridiculous notion that you can build a building that reaches to God. So God had to come down. So they're failing at what they're trying to do. That line tells you how presumptuous the ambition of the people was and how presumptuous such behavior is now as well. We can build skyscrapers that go up more than 100 stories. We can build airplanes that climb high into the skies. We can build missiles that can go into the stratosphere. And we can reach all the way to the moon. But human beings still cannot reach up into the heavens in order to displace God. Therefore, they should live with a little bit of humility and not think that they can either replace or become God. That is what I think it means when the text says that God had to come down in order to see what they were building. The desire to displace God is something that's existed throughout the history of humanity. In our more modern period, dictatorships that would ban the reading of the Bible, in other words, ban God. In fact, communism was atheist, right? They replaced God in the heavens with dictatorships here on earth. In other words, they didn't get rid of God. They just traded the God in the heavens for the political party or God that was here on earth. That's why they banned the Bible, because all these stories are a reminder you can't be God. You have to follow God's laws. So dictators want to be God. What was Pharaoh? Pharaoh said he was God in Egypt. So it's a battle between humanity's goal of some want to be godlike and those who want to obey God's teachings. Now listen to the next verse. Then the Lord said, if as one people who speak the same language, they have begun to do this, then all they plan to do will be possible. So come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. Right? So all of a sudden they're all speaking different languages. They can't speak to each other. So those who speak the same language group together and move out, because it's no longer comfortable to be together because they don't understand each other. And that's why it's called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So they refused to be scattered, so God said, I'll scatter you. I will force you to fill the earth, as was my intent at creation. So that's the story as it's found in today's Torah reading. There are, of course, many explanations, and each teaches us something of great value. I go to my teacher, Rabbi Reimer, who taught something from one of his teachers, Rabbi David Lazar, and it's eye-opening, so I want to share it with you. The story claims that originally all people spoke the same language. So the question we have to ask is, why is that bad? Why does God scatter them and confuse their languages so that they will not be able to understand each other? So they won't be able to work together. Aren't unity and mutual understanding a good thing? What is so bad that if they understand each other and they're unified? The prophets look forward to the time when all people will unite in the service of God. The prophets speak of a time, right? Ki veiti veit tefillah yikareh l'chol amim. My house will become a house of prayer for all the nations. So the prophets seem to talk about unity. Aleinu, which we recite 3 times a day, talks about people of the earth recognizing and acknowledging the one true God. And the prophets speak of a time when all people will gather together, where? At Mount Zion, and hear the word of the Lord in Jerusalem. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. So it seems to be that unity is a wonderful thing. But if so, why were the people of Babel punished by being scattered and losing the ability to understand each other? That's the question that Rabbi Lazar asks. And he suggests an answer. He says we have to understand there's a difference between unity and uniformity. Unity and uniformity. Unity means that different people who speak different languages, who have different thoughts, will nevertheless respect each other and treat each other with dignity and learn from each other. Uniformity means that different people will dress alike and think alike and look alike and worship alike and be alike. That would be a disaster. The people of the Tower of Babel were not seeking unity, they were seeking uniformity. And in God's creation, one of the things God marvels at is how different everything is, right? The trees, and the creation from the animals, and the animals from human beings, and man from woman. Everything is different. And God says about the difference, Vayera Elohim ki tov, this is great. This is great. The beauty of the difference of the creation. So unity, yes. Uniformity, no. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin explains the difference between unity and uniformity in this way. When a human being makes coins, he makes them all out of one seal. So they come out exactly alike, right? If you have a quarter that doesn't look like another quarter, it's no good. It has to be exactly alike. The dollar has to be exactly alike, or you know you got a fraud, right? Somebody created this dollar and it wasn't the government. So you have a $10 bill and I have a $10 bill, and they are not exactly alike. One of them is no good, counterfeit. But, says the Mishnah, The Holy One, blessed be he, is not like a human being. God has made all human beings from the same seal, from the same Adam and Eve, and yet no two of them are completely alike. So we used to think that the Mishnah was an exaggeration. Billions of people and no two are exactly alike. Now we know it's true. No two human beings have exactly the same fingerprints, and no two human beings have exactly the same DNA. Billions and billions of people, and no two are alike. Only God can do that. Human beings can't. Judaism does not claim that all human beings should worship in the same way, or dress the same way, or think the same way. Rather, Judaism insists instead on the right to be different and on the right to be treated with equal dignity. Different and dignity and respect, regardless of differences, as long as that person respects your right as well. You don't have to respect somebody who says you have no right to exist, or you have to exist as I exist. You have to be part of my religion or my culture, whatever it is. It has to be mutual respect. So why do I say this is a message for our time, not just an ancient fable? Because all over the world today, there's a struggle going on over precisely this issue. It's a struggle that's going on not only in some countries that haven't entered the 21st century, that haven't entered the 20th century yet, but it's also going on in sophisticated and civilized countries of Europe. And it's a struggle that's going on the campuses in America. In France, for example, the government passed a law that would forbid Muslim women from wearing the burqa while swimming. I'm not sure how you wear a burqa while swimming, but I'm sure why we should care if she's wearing a burqa or not while swimming. Why would that bother me? And it would forbid them from covering their faces while shopping. Why do I care what they look like when they're shopping? I understand the driver's license. You got to take the burqa off. But shopping? Swimming? Why can't women who follow their religion be given the right to dress according to the teachings, if they wish? Why does what they wear make them any less French than anyone else? Canada has forbidden the burqa in any of their federal buildings. Now, it's not that I'm sympathetic to the burqa. I think it's an insult to women, but that's within their own religious context. But think about it if they decided to forbid Orthodox Jewish women from covering their heads in the courtroom or in any particular area, told them you have to uncover your heads. In Switzerland, there's now increasing support for a law that would outlaw kosher slaughtering and for a law that would forbid circumcision. Support for that's growing. Why? Why cannot Jews be allowed to live their lives according to their own tradition and still be considered good Swiss citizens? Must everyone in Switzerland eat the same thing? And there's nothing to eat there. So it's a big problem. Or worship the same way in order to be a good Swiss? That's uniformity, not unity. France and Switzerland are modern Western countries. If these attitudes are coming into favor there, can you imagine how much more they are being practiced in Muslim countries? Now let's look at America. Focus on what is happening on the college campuses, which has been exposed to us in a frightful way the last 2 years. We have always prided ourselves on being a land that values free speech. There's no country in the world that has a free speech that we do. They have much greater limitations than in America. And yet, these are some of the things that have occurred on campuses recently. Berkeley is where free speech movement on campus was highlighted and began. Back in the 60s, the students of Berkeley picketed and protested against the war in Vietnam, and then it spread throughout the country. They picketed and spoke against the college's admission policies. and against overbearing rules in the dormitories. It was from Berkeley that student rebellions of the 60s began. The center of that campus in Berkeley is named for somebody called Mario Savio, the student leader who stood up for the right of any and every point of view to be heard, to be listened to be debated. And yet, what has Berkeley become in recent decades? It is a place for limiting, if not completely preventing, conservatives from speaking. They canceled speakers. Some of the speakers I would not have wanted to hear. I'm not going to go hear Ann Coulter. But she represents a significant conservative movement. The president of the university explained why her speech was canceled. He said, we can't guarantee her safety. On a college campus, you can't guarantee a person's safety because you disagree with their point of view. That became all too obvious with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. They were afraid at Berkeley that students might use smoke bombs or even real bombs to disrupt her talk. In Berkeley, in the school that was famous for the center of free speech, you cancel a speech because you're afraid the students are going to firebomb you? When Betsy DeVos was the Secretary of Education, a very controversial Secretary of Education, obviously. She was supposed to give her commencement address at Bethune-Cookman University. But because of the disturbance that hundreds of students created, they drowned her out and she was never able to finish her speech. So whether we are fans of such speakers is not the issue. That's why I pick speeches that none of us would particularly either want to hear or invite. But what we don't want to hear or we don't want to invite is not the rule. The rule is you have to have everybody from everybody's point of view if they respect the other point of view. Isn't the university supposed to be a place where students are exposed to many points of views? Those that they agree with and those they do not agree with. That the pro-Israel position was blocked from expression in classrooms and from speakers on so many of our so-called elite campuses the last decades. It didn't just start the last 2 years. It's been decades. It was only exposed in the last 2 years. Are these students so sensitive that they fear that they will be poisoned or demeaned if they or their classmates are exposed to views that they don't agree with? And if they can censor views that they disagree with by means of violence, then has their college education failed to teach them the key value of every university, which is that we value unity of purpose, but we do not value uniformity. That is what we saw in these colleges. They demanded uniformity of thinking, uniformity of positions on the Mideast conflict. Zionists were not welcome to speak or express themselves, and it reached the point of violence. So this ancient story of Babel, kind of a folksy type of story, a fun story. They do it in comic books for kids because it's such a fun story. But the point of that ancient story that we read today is extremely important. Unity, yes. Uniformity, no. Diversity is a good thing. That's what God wanted. Diversity. Forcing everyone to think alike is a very bad thing. That was a symbol of one language. You know, languages have, within the language, meanings that are unique, right? Charity in English is not tzedakah in Hebrew. So when you talk about charity and tzedakah, and you learn what charity means, what tzedakah is, you grow as a person. Your options expand. Your understanding expands. 2 different languages, 2 different cultures. That, I believe, is the real lesson of the story of the Tower of Babel. Or as Rabbi Lazer put it in the last line of his essay on this subject, who can say, he wrote, perhaps at least at times, babbling is really a good thing. Parroting what everyone else says in order to be accepted is a really bad thing, not only for birds, but for human beings as well. So I thank Rabbi Reamer, who brought us the teaching of Rabbi Lazar, for expanding our understanding and appreciation of this very ancient folk story that has so much to teach us today. Shabbat Shalom. Please rise for the Musaf service.